Hello and welcome and namaste from New Delhi. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Gautam Roy. Coming up over the next 1 hour. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal dubs India-US Trade Framework Agreement landmark. Tells Parliament it will promote Make in India and protect domestic agriculture and dairy. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will visit Malaysia over the weekend at the invitation of his counterpart Anwar Ibrahim. Russia says it will keep hitting Ukrainian targets till it agrees to its terms as round 2 of the tripartite talks is held in Abu Dhabi. Kyiv says this round will focus on military matters. The Kremlin pledges that President Putin intends to act responsibly as New START, the last nuclear pact with the US to limit both their warheads, is set to expire on Thursday. And the death toll in Nigeria's Kwara state climbs to at least 170 after bandits raid a remote village, shooting indiscriminately, setting fire to buildings. Well, first up, Union Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal on Wednesday assured members of Parliament that India has successfully safeguarded the interests of sensitive sectors, particularly agriculture and dairy, in the trade framework agreement with the United States, while ensuring significant benefits for Indian exporters. Take a look.
India's Minister of Commerce and Industry, Piyush Goyal, delivered a statement in Parliament on India-US Trade Framework Agreement, the details of which are being finalized. The minister assured Parliament on Wednesday that the Indian side has successfully safeguarded the nation's interests related to sensitive sectors, especially agriculture and dairy.
कृषि क्षेत्र में भारत की प्रमुख संवेदनशीलता को पूर्णतः ध्यान रखा गया है। साथ ही यह साझेदारी लघु एवं मध्यम उद्यमों, एमएसएमईज, उद्यमियों, कुशल श्रमिकों और उद्योग के लिए नए अवसर खोलेगी।
Minister further said that the India and US understanding aligns with India's vision of Make in India, Design in India and Innovate in India for the world and is a significant step towards Viksit Bharat 2047 and Atmanirbhar Bharat. On energy imports, Piyush Goyal reiterated that ensuring energy security for 140 crore Indians remains the government's top priority. He said diversifying energy sources is central to India's strategy as the country moves towards becoming a developed nation. Piyush Goyal also informed the members of parliament that both sides will work together to conclude the technical details and paperwork and detailed contours of which will be announced after all procedures are completed.
मैं स्पष्ट करना चाहता हूं, जैसा कि सरकार ने कई बार सार्वजनिक रूप से कहा है कि 140 करोड़ भारतीयों की ऊर्जा आवश्यकताओं की सुरक्षा सुनिश्चित करना सरकार की सर्वोत्तम प्राथमिकता है। वस्तुनिष्ठ बाजार स्थितियों और बदलते अंतर्राष्ट्रीय परिदृश्यों के अनुरूप ऊर्जा स्रोतों में विविधता लाना हमारी इस कार्यनीति का मूल आधार है। भारत की सभी कार्रवाइयां इसी बात को ध्यान में रखकर की जाती हैं। अतः मैं माननीय सदस्यों से इन मुद्दों को समुचित दृष्टिकोण से देखने का आग्रह करता हूं।
Reduction of US tariffs to 18% has been the biggest takeaway so far from the developments which took place on Monday following a phone call made by US President Donald Trump to Prime Minister Modi. Bureau Report, DD India.
Well, let's talk about tariff detente that India has in the first place reached with the US. Joining us is Ambassador Mohan Kumar, a former senior diplomat with a lot of experience, in fact, in India's earlier trade negotiations, both at the GATT and WTO levels. Good evening to you, Ambassador Mohan Kumar. Now, do you get a sense that everyone is jumping the gun over this development and it would be better to wait for a final picture or text, black and white stuff to emerge?
Absolutely, Gautam. Thank you very much for having me. I think what viewers need to understand is that number one, as you rightly say, we will have to look at the fine print. You cannot assess a trade deal unless you look at the T's and the I's, as it were. The second thing that I want to note is that this is the first phase of the negotiation, according to spokespersons of the American government. So you will have to see this as an ongoing negotiation where I think this part of the trade agreement is over, but obviously there is unfinished business. I think what I want to underline is that the 50% tariff was hurting Indian traders. It was hurting the Indian economy. That will be lifted forthwith, and we will reach the level of 18%. That may not be brilliant. 0% obviously would be better, but you would have to say that it leaves us in a much better position vis-a-vis our South Asian neighbors and also vis-a-vis countries of East Asia. So what we should do right now is compliment the government and welcome the tariff reduction. It's not come a day too soon. And then our negotiators will continue to dot the I's and cross the T's, as it were, with the American negotiators.
Right, and from what Donald Trump put out on Truth Social on Monday, isn't the only clear-cut concrete inference to be drawn is related to the tariff reduction that you spoke of by the US on Indian goods?
Yes, and that's the most important thing, Gautam, frankly. I mean, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. The traders and the industry were hurting at 50%. That has come down to 18%. I also want to tell you that there is a certain market sentiment and there is a certain investment sentiment which will start picking up. They will not wait for the final agreement to be signed by the two sides. What the sentiment, and that is why you see the Sensex and others react to this deal. What the investors will look for is medium to long term, and they will already be looking to invest in India. Other countries will be looking to export and import from India. I think the last point I want to make is that this also comes close on the heels of the FTA that we have concluded with the European Union. It shows India's trade policy now is on the offensive, number one. Number two, we signal to the world that we are open for business. And third, we have every intention of carrying out an aggressive trade policy, which will then set us on the path to achieve Viksit Bharat. So that seems to me the strategy of the government.
Okay, that's a point well driven home. But let me just ask you, we all know that Donald Trump is somewhat given to hyperbole. Let's talk about the kind of deals, so-called deals that he announced, the slew of trade deals that he announced with different developed and emerging economies. What do we know about the final shape and form of all those deals?
I agree with you. There have been other deals. There are two or three things that we have to note about this trade deal with the United States. First of all, it is not a free trade agreement. The one we concluded with the European Union is a free trade agreement, which is a recognized exception to Article 1, which is MFN of WTO law. This is not a free trade agreement. It's a bilateral trade agreement, which means it only applies to certain specific sectors between United States and India. Second, if it is a bilateral trade agreement, I don't know the kind of dispute settlement resolution mechanisms that we have agreed with the United States. What if there is a difference of view tomorrow? I'm not sure, because it depends on the goodwill of the two sides, the credibility of the two leaders, and so on. So this becomes a little bit more informal, if you like. The last thing to note, of course, is that the United States has gone back and forth with regard to some trading partners by switching from high duties to low duties and low duties back to high duties, South Korea being a case in point. So we will have to be aware of those things. My sense is that because we were subject to a duty of 50% for such a long time, my sense is the US realizes that there is more to be lost than gained by penalizing India. Much better to have India on its side. And we've also, I think, concluded this FTA with the European Union. So there is a feeling I get that the world is betting on India, and therefore India must do everything possible to fully negotiate with US. I've said elsewhere that our strategy of no confrontation, no capitulation, and continued conversation with the United States has borne fruit, and therefore we must stick to that strategy.
Also, let's also examine what Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal has told Parliament earlier today itself. He's been unequivocal about the benefits of this agreement for India's industry, big and small, manufacturers and exporters, while protecting farm and dairy. He's also talked about giving top priority to India's energy security and the need for technology transfers. Now, how critical are all these factors?
Those are important. And I think the Prime Minister, in one of his earliest statements, said, listen, I am not going to let down the interests of farmers, small, medium entrepreneurs, and fishermen. These are important sectors. And the Prime Minister went as far as to say, if I remember right, that he is willing to pay a price. He knows that India might pay a price. And I suspect to some extent that is the price we have already paid by allowing ourselves to be subject to 50%. So I believe the Commerce Minister when he says that India will have protected the interests of agriculture, dairy, and fisheries, no question, and small and medium entrepreneurs, no question. I think on energy security, it could be interpreted differently. For example, it's true that the government of India is attached to energy security. But the Commerce Minister also made an additional statement that we need to diversify our sources. That could be interpreted to mean that we can move away from Russian purchases, which have already come down anyway, and we will buy more energy from the United States, which may actually be in the interest of the energy security of India. So you could interpret it both ways. My sense is that we will spread the risk as much as possible when it comes to energy imports.
All right. Sounds good so far, and we'll get to know more about it as and when things materialize in the black and white form. Thanks a lot for joining us and talking about it, Master Mohan Kumar. I understand that you're with us a little later in the show as well to talk about another subject. I will not talk about it right now, but thank you for sticking around. Now, Prime Minister Modi will be paying an official visit to Malaysia on the 7th and 8th of this month. The PM is going to be there at his Malaysian counterpart's invitation, and it's taking place at his invitation, that is of Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. This would be the third visit of Prime Minister Modi to Malaysia, and during this visit, Prime Minister Modi will hold bilateral discussions with Prime Minister Ibrahim. The PM will also interact with members of the Indian community along with industry and business representatives. The 10th India-Malaysia CEO Forum is also scheduled to be held, coinciding with the visit of Prime Minister Modi. India and Malaysia share long-standing bonds of friendship based on historical, civilizational and cultural connections. The relationship is further strengthened by the presence of a 2.9 million strong Indian diaspora in Malaysia, the third largest in the world. India-Malaysia relationship is multifaceted and growing. The forthcoming visit of Prime Minister Modi will serve as an opportunity for both the leaders to review the entire gamut of bilateral cooperation. Now, Washington is hosting a critical minerals ministerial in the capital city of the U.S. at a session. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance said that the meet is aimed at boosting access to critical minerals, which the U.S. will establish a system for creating price floors for different commodities. J.D. Vance said the U.S. was proposing a trading bloc for critical minerals, and many countries have already signed up to this plan.
This conference is to align trade policy, development finance, and diplomatic engagement towards a shared strategic objective. And that objective is very simple: diversifying global supply in the critical minerals market while strengthening the partner countries who help all of us in this shared effort.
Now, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is taking part in this critical minerals ministerial, which has been convened by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Washington, D.C. On the sidelines of the meeting, the External Affairs Minister met Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar in Washington, D.C. again. Minister Jaishankar also met Uzbekistan's Foreign Minister Bakhtiar Saidov on the sidelines of this critical minerals ministerial today in D.C. And Dr. Jaishankar also met Romania's counterpart, Vana Soy. He also met counterparts of Canada, Poland, as well as Singapore. And still to come in this edition of DD India News Hour. The US and Iran are set to hold talks in Oman on Friday, even as an alleged Iranian drone targeting America's aircraft carrier was brought down over the Arabian Sea. Tensions remain high in Balochistan, where Pakistan security forces have launched a major counter-offensive against armed separatists, with hundreds killed. And 15 migrants drown in the Aegean Sea off the Greek coast after their boat collided with a Coast Guard vessel.
Food systems contribute to a third of global planet warming emission. In today's episode, let's take a look at what happens when food systems stop working for everyone.
After Hatibondo arrived, we discussed as a village the challenge that we were facing. And we came to the conclusion that we should sow some crops, especially for the elephants.
The Meramo Cafe is basically promoting the circular economy. So there's not much transportation involved in that process. So this is one way that we are reducing the carbon emission from that point of view.
He's probably laughing because despite the fact that they're cleaning up other people's problems for free, it seems like nobody here actually wants them to be doing it.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Gautam Roy. Now, with the clock ticking towards the 5th of February expiration of the New START Treaty, the last remaining nuclear arms control agreement between the United States and Russia, uncertainty is mounting. For the first time in half a century, both the nations could face a future without limits on their strategic arsenals. DD India's Rahul Upadhyay gets us more.
Russia-US Nuclear Arms Control Treaty, called New START, is set to expire on February 5. Russian President Vladimir Putin has proposed extending existing warhead limits for 1 year to allow time for new negotiations. However, US President Donald Trump has yet to formally respond. For the first time in over 50 years, both nations, without an agreement, would face no mutual constraints on their strategic arsenals, the weapons designed to strike capitals, bases, and industrial centers in a nuclear conflict. Even during the Cold War, Washington and Moscow forged treaties to prevent arms race from spiraling. From 1969 until after the Soviet collapse in 1991, both sides valued a predictable framework to limit nuclear stockpiles. Now, with New START weeks from expiring and no talks underway, uncertainty looms. Putin's proposal would keep the cap of 1,550 deployed warheads per side for another 12 months. Analysts say such a move would also signal to China that the US will not expand its arsenal in response to Beijing's growing nuclear forces. Meanwhile, Pope Leo has urged Russia and the United States to renew New START.
In questo nostro tempo,
The current situation requires doing everything possible to prevent a new arms race that further threatens peace among nations. It is more urgent than ever to replace the logic of fear and distrust with a shared ethic capable of guiding choices toward the common good and to make peace a heritage preserved by everyone.
Trump has voiced interest in pursuing denuclearization with both Russia and China. But Beijing insists it's unreasonable and unrealistic to join three-way talks with countries whose arsenals are far larger. Rahul Upadhyay's report for DD India.
As well as another important international development is that the United States and Iran are set for nuclear talks in Oman on Friday, even as tensions rise in West Asia. A growing U.S. military buildup and recent incidents at sea have raised fears of escalation. DD India's Adamya Mishra brings us this report.
The United States and Iran are set to hold nuclear talks in Oman on Friday as tensions remain high between the two sides. Speaking at the White House, US President Donald Trump confirmed negotiations are underway but declined to give details on the talks.
They are negotiating. They'd like to do something, and we'll see if something is going to be done. They had a chance to do something a while ago, and it didn't work out, and we did Midnight Hammer. I don't think they want that happening again, but they would like to negotiate. We are negotiating with them right now, yes.
Iran requested the talks be shifted from Turkey to Oman, insisting discussions be limited strictly to its nuclear program. Tehran has ruled out any concessions on its ballistic missile capability, calling it a red line and warning of retaliation if its security is threatened. Even as diplomacy continues, the United States has stepped up military pressure on Iran. The aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln, along with guided missile destroyers, fighter jets and air defense systems, has arrived in West Asia under US Central Command. Tensions escalated further after the US military shot down an Iranian drone that approached the USS Abraham Lincoln in the Arabian Sea. In a separate incident in the Strait of Hormuz, Iran Revolutionary Guard boats threatened a US-flagged tanker before it sped away. The incidents pushed oil prices higher, reflecting fears of a wider confrontation. Gulf countries are increasingly worried that a US strike could destabilize the region following recent protests and unrest in Iran. Officials say the priority of the Oman talks is to avoid conflict and de-escalate tensions. Friday's meeting is now seen as a critical test whether diplomacy prevails or the standoff slides closer to a military confrontation. Adamya Mishra's report for DD India.
US President Trump on Tuesday signed a spending bill into law which ended a brief partial government shutdown and gives Congress more time to debate possible limits on his immigration crackdown. The legislation restores funding for defense, healthcare, labor, education, housing and other agencies and temporarily extends funding for the Department of Homeland Security until the 13th of this month after the Department of Homeland Security funding lapsed because lawmakers hadn't acted in time. The bill cleared the Senate with strong bipartisan support and narrowly passed the House 217 to 214. The previous shutdown lasted a record 43 days and cost the U.S. economy an estimated $11 billion. Also, the Trump administration has announced immediate removal of 700 immigration officers from Minnesota after weeks of operations and the fatal shooting of 2 civilian protesters, which sparked widespread outrage. Border Czar Tom Homan said the drawdown will still leave around 2,000 officers in the state, up from about 150 before the launch of the sweeping immigration operations. Federal agents shot 2 U.S. citizens, triggering protests and criticism from civil rights groups and local officials. The killings drew international attention and condemnation. European Union lawmakers have decided to revive work on the bloc's long-stalled trade deal with the United States, ending a temporary freeze triggered by political tensions with Washington. On Wednesday, the European Parliament proposals aimed at easing import duties on a range of US goods. The process was suspended amid protests Donald Trump's demands related to Greenland and renewed tariff threats. Now, tensions are escalating in Pakistan's southwestern Balochistan province as security forces intensify operations against armed separatists, following a fresh surge in coordinated violence across the region. Take a look.
Tensions remain high in Balochistan, where Pakistan's security forces have launched a major counter-offensive against separatist insurgents. Security officials say drones and helicopters were deployed to retake a key town after a 3-day battle. The violence has left at least 58 civilians and security personnel dead, highlighting the intensity of the clashes. Authorities claim nearly 200 separatist militants have been killed since a coordinated wave of attacks began over the weekend, pushing the overall death toll beyond 250. Analysts warn the unrest reflects a shift in the Baloch insurgency from a largely tribal conflict to a more organized, urban, and nationwide threat.
If you look at the insurgency in Balochistan, it is deadlocked on the battlefield. Which means that both sides, the insurgent side and the military, are not in a position to impose a military solution on the other. And the longer this deadlock persists without a political recourse, you will see more extreme forms of violence, like the one we saw the other day when a multiple coordinated attack was launched in 12 districts of Balochistan.
Pakistan has battled Baloch separatist violence for decades, marked by repeated attacks on security forces, foreign nationals, and non-local residents in the mineral-rich province bordering Afghanistan and Iran. Bureau Report, DD India.
15 migrants drowned in the Aegean Sea off the coast of Greece on Tuesday after their boat collided with the Coast Guard vessel off the island of Chios. A Coast Guard official said that they spotted a dinghy transporting migrants towards Chios, which lies a few miles off the coast of Turkey, and ordered them to turn back. He added that the smugglers maneuvered towards the Coast Guard vessel, causing a collision. 2 Coast Guard officers were injured and transferred to hospital, and 24 migrants got rescued. Witnesses reported that about 30 to 35 people were on board. Search and rescue efforts got underway with Coast Guard vessels, private boats, as well as divers assisting in the operation. Let's now look at some more stories making news around the world. London bus driver Ricky Reid has become a local sensation by spreading joy with a bubble gun while driving his iconic red double-decker. What began 4 years ago with a discount bottle of bubbles has turned into a daily ritual, with Reid blessing his bus and passengers before setting off. Nicknamed Mr. Bubbles Man by regulars, Reid's playful gesture has lifted spirits across the city. Crowds gathered in Richmond, Virginia to welcome Buddhist monks on their nationwide walk for peace, which began in Fort Worth, Texas last October. The journey aims to raise awareness of inner peace and mindfulness across the U.S. Attendees praised the monks' message, stressing the need for unity amid social divisions. Amsterdam's renowned Rijksmuseum is opening a major exhibition titled Metamorphoses, highlighting the 2,000-year impact of Ovid's epic poem on art, literature and culture. Featuring 80 works from 50 museums and collections worldwide, the show traces how artists from Titian to Marguerite reinterpreted Ovid's tales of transformation through sculpture, painting and beyond. And still to come in this edition of DD India News Hour. We'll be speaking with our expert guests about the fate of the tripartite talks underway in Abu Dhabi as Russia keeps up military pressure on Ukraine to accept its terms. Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Gautam Roy, and let's take another look at our top stories. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal dubs India-US Trade Framework Agreement landmark, tells Parliament it will promote Make in India and protect domestic agriculture and dairy. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be visiting Malaysia over the weekend at the invitation of his counterpart Anwar Ibrahim. Russia says it will keep hitting Ukrainian targets till it agrees to its terms on as round 2 of the tripartite talks is held in Abu Dhabi. Kyiv says this round will focus on military matters. And the Kremlin pledges that President Putin intends to act responsibly as New START, the last nuclear pact with the US to limit both their warheads, is set to expire on Thursday. Now, day 1 of the new round of 2-day US-mediated peace talks between Russia and Ukraine wrapped up in the United Arab Emirates on Wednesday, with Kyiv saying the focus is to remain on military and security issues. Moscow has reiterated its hardline demands and vowed to continue its military operation. The talks come amid fresh missile and drone attacks on each other's energy infrastructure and continued fighting along the front lines.
A second round of US-mediated peace talks between Russia and Ukraine opened in the United Arab Emirates on Wednesday, with Kyiv saying the discussions will focus primarily on military issues.
The focus of these peace talks will primarily be on military and military political issues. This is clear from the composition of the delegations meeting there. There are many nuances regarding how, hypothetically, the war could end, which is what Ukraine is interested in.
Ukraine's lead negotiator, Rustem Umerov, said the talks began in Abu Dhabi, with delegations meeting in separate groups before holding joint discussions. Writing on X, Umerov said, Ukraine is seeking a just and lasting peace. As talks opened, the Kremlin reiterated its hardline stance. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Russia's military operation would continue unless Kyiv agreed to Moscow's demands, including withdrawing troops from parts of eastern Ukraine and recognizing Russian control over occupied territory.
Russia continues its special military operation. The door to a peaceful settlement is open. Russia maintains its openness. Our position is crystal clear, well understood by both the Kyiv regime and the American negotiators, who are providing their good services in conducting these trilateral negotiations and to whom we are grateful for their efforts. But until the Kyiv regime makes the appropriate decisions, the special military operation continues.
Ukraine has rejected the conditions, saying any settlement must freeze the conflict along the current front lines and prevent future attacks. Moreover, Ukrainian strikes targeted energy facilities in parts of Russia's Belgorod region, triggering power outages. The two-day negotiations come amid heightened tensions following a wave of Russian drone and missile strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure last week. President Volodymyr Zelensky said the attacks show Moscow continues to prioritize war over diplomacy. Meanwhile, Russian forces advanced toward frontline villages near Zaporizhzhia, prompting evacuations by local authorities. The European Union accused Moscow of exploiting ceasefire talks while continuing attacks.
Putin can end this war right now. He doesn't show any signs of wanting to do so. He misuses even the discussions on the ceasefire to continuously attack the civilian infrastructure and kill innocent people.
Despite diplomatic efforts to broker a deal, Kyiv and Moscow remain far apart on key issues after multiple rounds of talks. Bureau Report, DD India.
And let me now again go to Ambassador Mohan Kumar, the former senior diplomat, to talk about the possible fate of these talks in the quest for peace as far as Ukraine is concerned. How's it looking, Ambassador Kumar, with the kind of attacks Russia has been carrying out? Even Ukraine has also been, hitting some Russian assets, but the Russian response has been an unprecedented barrage in recent times in the 4 years of the fighting. So what does it look like will emerge come when talks are wrapped up, the 2 days are wrapped up tomorrow?
Thank you, Gautam, and it's good to see you again. I think it frankly looks difficult to me. The backdrop doesn't look too good, as you rightly say. The energy infrastructure of Kiev has been relentlessly attacked by the Russian military forces. There was supposed to be an energy ceasefire which was supposed to last a week. And there is even fundamental disagreement about when that started and when that ended. Ukraine believes it should have still continued. Russia believes that the 1 week period is over and therefore they can resume attacks on energy infrastructure. I see three big issues standing in the way of a final settlement. One is territory, and I think your correspondent said Donbas and eastern Ukraine. The question is not the territory already occupied by Russia, because that I think Ukraine will be not happy, but Ukraine will agree that we should freeze the battle lines. I think the demand of Russia that Ukraine should also give up a land which is now considered as buffer between the Ukrainian front line and the Russian front line in Donbass, that is the bone of contention. And that I think the Ukrainians believe will be a disaster for them militarily. And Russians, of course, have their own case on that issue. The second issue that is difficult to resolve is post military cessation of hostilities. How do you ensure the security of Russia and Ukraine? Russia's security for them means that Ukraine should not be part of NATO and NATO troops should not be present in Ukraine or any Western troops for that matter. Ukraine believes that it needs security guarantees to ensure that Russia does not attack it another time when Russia becomes more powerful or 1 or 2 years down the line. So this issue needs to be resolved. And somehow they will have to find a way where the cessation of hostilities is translated into a proper ceasefire on the ground, and which are the troops that are allowed to actually patrol and keep the peace in Ukraine. The third issue, I think, Gautam, is the fate of the Zaporizhia nuclear plant and who owns that plant. The Russians have demanded that this nuclear plant should be owned and operated by them, whereas Ukraine believes that this plant should be to actually supply power to Ukraine even after the war stops, because as you can imagine, the energy infrastructure of Ukraine has virtually been bombed out of existence. I mean, people are there suffering. It's the dead of winter, the middle of winter, and there is no heating. So you can imagine. So those are the three issues. And I see the American negotiators in your screen, on your screen, which is Steve Witkoff and the son-in-law of President Trump, that is Jared Kushner, and they are acting as a go-between for Russia and Ukraine. So we will have to wait and see what happens. But I would be lying to you if I said I'm very hopeful of a settlement tomorrow.
But I must ask, Master Kumar, can't the US easily tip the scales in the favor of one and against the other?
Well, I think the Americans actually have gone to and fro, President Trump. You will remember that very fateful meeting that the Ukrainian president had in the Oval Office with J.D. Vance and President Trump and Marco Rubio all jumping on him, and he was virtually booted out of the White House. So that was when President Trump and others told Ukrainian president that they don't have any cards to play. And then I think there was a situation when actually the Americans told the Russians that they must absolutely put an end to the war. And they started imposing sanctions and they threatened more sanctions. So to be fair to the Americans, they have tried everything, forcing one side, then forcing the other. It just shows you, Gautam, how intractable this conflict is. You know, this is not an easy conflict to resolve. This has baggage, political baggage. ideological baggage. And then, of course, you have territory, loss of life, and the virtual armaments and so on involved. So it's not easy. And I think that is what the Americans are realizing, that this is not an easy conflict to resolve. And yet the Americans have taken upon themselves to try and see how to bring an end to this conflict. So I'll be very surprised if suddenly, after the second round of talks in Abu Dhabi, the trilateral talks, as they call it, leads to a permanent peace. On the other hand, if somehow we can go step by step, first put an end to the conflict, stop military operations, because that's something we haven't been able to do, or the Americans haven't been able to do, and then talk of a lasting solution. Because bear in mind that the most important actor in some ways is missing in Abu Dhabi, and that is the European Union. This is, after all, a conflict in the middle of Europe.
Yes.
And the European Union has an important stake in this conflict. And yet, this is a three-way diplomatic or a negotiation between Ukraine, Russia, and the US. European Union is not there. So at some point, European Union will also have to be co-opted, because Europe has a big stake in this conflict.
And do you think it will also be worthwhile to, accept, apart from doing these representative level talks, military and political, a mix of military, political, just straight away go to the leadership level? That's what Zelensky has also suggested, that we need to sit down, leader facing leader, and decide, take a final call on things.
You are right, Gautam, but unless you know the specific battle lines on Donbass, it's very hard to expect the leaders to know which town is involved, in which side, and why is it that the Russians are asking for territory not currently occupied by them. Those issues only the negotiators can do, frankly. And then you can leave the tough decisions to the leaders. The tough decisions to the leaders in the sense that, who are the troops who will keep the peace in Ukraine? What is the kind of arms, the backstop, as they call it? What is the American guarantee? That Ukraine insists on an American guarantee because they know that Europe is not militarily strong at this stage. So they are insisting on an American guarantee so that Russia does not attack them again. Those kind of issues, the leaders can take a call. I agree with you. But on issues like the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, who owns it? On issues like the front line in Donbass, exactly where this front line should be, those must be tackled by negotiators. And you must, the general principle, I would say, in these negotiations is you should only leave one or two important issues for the leaders. You cannot take the whole basket of issues to the leaders and say, you sort it out. That will never happen.
Okay.
I'm afraid we haven't reached that stage yet. There are still, to my mind, too many issues which are still unresolved. And I must be honest in conveying to you that I don't think the Russian attacks on the energy infrastructure in Ukraine are helping matters, because that makes Ukraine even more aggressive, even more stubborn, and even more, shall we say, steadfast in defending their positions. So somehow we will have to find a way where the cessation of hostilities happens, and then the talks intensify, and then both sides sit together and sign a peace deal.
Yes, and but the other reality also is that every passing day, Russia keeps nibbling away at Ukraine's territory. So, in a sense, the war is being lost as well. But ultimately, there cannot be perhaps a defeat through conflict itself. There has to be some kind of a way out. Thank you for joining us for the moment, Ambassador Mohan Kumar. Now, at least 170 people have been killed in Nigeria's Quir state, where gunmen attacked a village on Tuesday. The assailants invaded Foro village in the Kayama area around 6 in the evening, setting shops ablaze. Nigerian police confirmed the attack but did not give official casualty figures. The Quir state government blamed the violence on terrorist cells, with Governor Abdul Razzaq condemning the assault as a cowardly expression of frustration by militants. Now, still to come on DD India News Hour. Yumnan Khemchand Singh takes oath as new Manipur Chief Minister, along with two deputy CMs after the revocation of President's rule in the northeastern state. Aaron George's sensational century guides India into the ICC Under-19 World Cup final. And India win 9 medals on day 1 of the Asian Rifle/Pistol Championship.
Food systems contribute to a third of global planet warming emission. In today's episode, let's take a look at what happens when food systems stop working for everyone.
After Hatibondu arrived, we discussed as a village the challenge that we were facing. And we came to the conclusion that we should sow some crops, especially for the elephants.
The Meramo Cafe is basically promoting the circular economy. So there's not much transportation involved in that process. So this is one way that we are reducing the carbon emission from that point of view.
He's probably laughing because despite the fact that they're cleaning up other people's problems for free, it seems like nobody here actually wants them to be doing it.
Geopolitics and trade deals. Economic challenges amid development. Hard work and the path to prosperity. It's the economy, always. Between walkers, money is what money does and says. Supply creates its own demand. Between the bulls pulls and bears tears. When supply chains globalization and India rises to the podium. We'll get you centered with the Economic Brief at 8 p.m. every Thursday.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Gautam Roy. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has spoken with the Critical Minerals Ministerial meeting in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, stressing the need to secure and diversify global supply chains for critical minerals. The External Affairs Minister underlined the risks posed by excessive concentration of supply and said de-risking supply chains requires structured international cooperation among trusted partners. He highlighted India's efforts to build greater resilience in the sector and also conveyed India's support for the Forge initiative aimed at strengthening cooperation on critical minerals and ensuring reliable, sustainable supply chains essential for future technologies. INS Ghadial of the Indian Navy has arrived at the Colombo port on Wednesday carrying a consignment of 10 Bailey bridges for Sri Lanka's post-cyclone Ditwa reconstruction. The arrival has come on Sri Lanka's National Day, giving added significance to India's assistance. Earlier last week, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar had tweeted that India would dispatch the bridges as part of its $450 million special economic package announced for Sri Lanka's recovery. The support follows India's earlier emergency humanitarian assistance and disaster relief under Operation Sagar Bandhu. Cyclone Ditwa had caused widespread flooding, landslides and major infrastructure damage across Sri Lanka late last year. India's Chief of Defence Staff General Anil Chauhan met with many dignitaries during his Armenia visit. CDS General Anil Chauhan led the Indian delegation for a courtesy call on Karen Brutyan, Deputy Minister of Defence of the Republic of Armenia. The interaction underscored the commitment of strengthening bilateral defence cooperation and advancing strategic collaboration across key security and regional domains of mutual interest between both the nations. General Chauhan also interacted with the Minister of High-Tech Industry of the Republic of Armenia, Miktar Hayrapetyan. Earlier, General Chauhan interacted with the Prime Minister of the Republic of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, exchanging views on the evolving geopolitical landscape and prevailing security environment. The discussions also highlighted emerging opportunities for collaboration and avenues to further strengthen bilateral defense and strategic cooperation. Back home, BJP leader Yumnam Khemchand Singh was sworn in as the Chief Minister of Manipur on Wednesday, hours after President's rule in the state was lifted. Governor Ajay Kumar Bhalla administered the oath of office and secrecy at a ceremony held at Lok Bhavan, attended by senior BJP leaders and NDA functionaries. Manipur had been under President's rule since February last year amid prolonged unrest. In his first remark after taking office, Singh said he would work to honour the trust placed in him by Prime Minister Modi and Home Minister Amit Shah, adding that Manipur's strength lies in its 36 communities, which have long shaped the state's social fabric. Bangladesh's human rights situation over the past 17 months under the interim government has been deeply alarming, according to a report released on Wednesday by the Human Rights Support Society. HRSS documented widespread political violence, attacks on journalists and abuses against women and children since the 5th of August 2024. The report recorded at least 1,411 incidents of political violence, resulting in 195 deaths, alongside 413 cases of mob violence, which claimed 313 lives. Journalists were frequently targeted, with 427 incidents of attacks affecting at least 834 media workers. Violence against women and children was described as a major concern, with more than 2,500 victims of abuse, including 1,016 cases of rape. The organization attributed the worsening situation to weak law enforcement and ineffective government action. Sri Lankan President Anura Kumar Dissanayake on Wednesday inaugurated the exposition of the sacred Devanimori relics of Lord Buddha at the Gangaramaya Temple in Colombo, marking their first ever international display. The relics arrived aboard a special Indian Air Force aircraft and were received by senior Sri Lankan ministers and Buddhist clergy. Discovered at the Devanimori site in Gujarat, the relics date back to the early centuries of the Common Era and will remain on public display at Gangaramaya Temple till the 10th of this month. Thousands of devotees are expected to attend the 7-day exposition, highlighting the deep spiritual and cultural ties between India and Sri Lanka. Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya thanked the Government of India and Prime Minister Modi for facilitating the exposition, calling it a blessing for the people of Sri Lanka.
Witnessing these relics, that's a huge honor and a tremendous opportunity for our people. So I really appreciate this gesture by the Indian government, by Prime Minister Modi, for taking these relics out for the first time to Sri Lanka and giving this opportunity to us.
Let's also get you some sporting updates now, starting with cricket, where India secured a commanding 7-wicket win over Afghanistan in the second semi-final of the ICC Under-19 World Cup in Harare. Aaron George's sensational 100 helped India chase down the target of 311 runs in 41.1 overs only in a 50-over match. Captain Ayush Matre also contributed with a vital 62. The foundation for the chase was laid by Vaibhav Suryavanshi, whose explosive 68 provided India with a blistering start. In the first innings, Afghanistan also batted well as they posted 310 for 4, powered by centuries from Faisal Shirozada and Uzairullah Niazai. This marks the 6th consecutive and 10th overall final for Team India in the Under-19 tournament. 5-time champions India will battle England in the final on Friday. Royal Challengers Bengaluru will take on the Delhi Capitals in an exciting final of the Women's Premier League 2026 on Thursday. Vadodara's BCA Stadium will play host to the biggest fixture of the competition as 3-time runners-up Delhi eye maiden WPL title against former champions RCB. Led by Smriti Mandhana, RCB enjoyed a dominant run, registering 6 wins in their 8 games to advance to the finals. The Capitals joined RCB at the Summit Clash after a magnificent performance against the Gujarat Giants in the eliminator. The upcoming finale will be the second time that RCB and DC battled it out for the title in WPL history. The fierce rivals had taken on each other in the final of the 2024 edition of the league in Delhi, where RCB pulled off a dominant victory by 8 wickets. And in shooting, India's Isha Singh won the 10-meter air pistol gold medal at the ongoing Asian Rifle/Pistol Championship at the Dr. Karni Singh Shooting Range in New Delhi. There was 4.4-point gap between Isha, who scored 239.8, and second placed Yen Qingcheng of Chinese Taipei. In the men's section, Samrat Rana finished with a score of 220.3 to clinch the bronze medal. India also won the women's team gold in air pistol, where Isha, Manu Bhakar and Suruchi Singh combined for an effort of 1726. Jonathan Gavin Anthony in the 10-meter air pistol junior men's event also won a double gold on the day like Isha. Overall, India won a total of 9 medals, including 6 golds, 2 silvers, ending the day as league leaders. And that's all we have for this edition of DD India News Hour. But let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. And for those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India's mobile app. It's available on both Android and iOS. Just scan the QR code on the screen to download the app right away. And we'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Gautam Roy. And from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.